Hello there guys. As you can see here, it is Christmas time in Guild Wars 2, and with that I'm bringing you another ranger build. Now the last build I was doing was a trap build, and I really liked it. It did some really good damage, but a few people told me that they didn't like traps, or the traps were bad, or something like that. So I wanted to do a build without traps that will still do some good condition damage. And this is what I've come up with. So first off, I'm using the short bow, which is just purely good condition damage as well as some CC. So that's all good. And then I'm using the sword, and now I would have used the torch previously because you can switch out between them, but as of this current patch, you can no longer switch out weapons during games. So this horn is extremely good for the speed as well as the fury and might, and the birds aren't bad at all. So the sword will be our more defensive weapon that we'll switch out occasionally, and as well to get the buff here off the horn. The sword is very good for its dodge and the leap, which acts almost as a dodge. The short bow will be our main damage dealer, and we'll try to flank as much as possible to get that maximum damage out of these bleeds. Now with that said, in terms of the abilities we're using, I'm just using the healing spring because it's so good. The regen off it is nice, the healing off it is nice, and it gives a nice combo field of water. The other abilities I'm using in terms of utility skills are Quickening Zephyr, which is pretty good for damage. Its quickness, you can't be healed while you're in it, so you have to time it away from your healing. You might want to pop it early to counter that, or you might want to pop your heal early to counter that, so it's up to you. And then for the second skill, I'm using Muddy Terrain. It's an Immobilize and Cripple, so it's good defensively. If you want to use this build as a really offensive build, then you may want to switch that out for the Sharpening Stone, for that extra bleed. And then Lightning Reflexes is the third utility skill, which will both break a stun, make us evade backwards, and give us vigor. This is extremely useful. I can't say how useful it is. It is good for all three cases, and I cannot recommend it enough. Now finally, for the utility skill, I'm currently using Entangle. This is not something that I recommend particularly at all. You can use the other two skills if you want. I'd maybe even recommend the Rampages one, but I'm currently testing out for Entangle because I lost some crippling with my ditching the trap, so I wanted to switch that out for the Entangle for that extra nice bleeds and for the Immobilize. With that said, let's get into weapons, runes, and such. Now I'm using the Runes of the Nightmare. The Runes of the Nightmare give pure condition damage, which is exactly what we want, and then a 5% chance to cause fear whenever we're hit. Now this goes off a good amount and is very useful for both just getting them off you and getting a good opportunity to get some bleeds off, because when you fear someone away from you, you're automatically flanking them. Really good. For sigils, we're using the 60% chance to bleed on crit. Always a good rune. And then for the sword and horn, I have another bleed 60% chance on crit, and that goes well with the birds. And then we have the Sigil of Superior Doom, which will poison an enemy. I have already explained this logic in a previous video, in which I'm only going to be using the sword very quickly, so I want that thing to go off quickly, so it'll go off on my first attack with the sword. Finally, I'm using the Rabid Amulet for its precision and condition damage, and the toughness is a nice bonus that keeps us alive a lot longer. Now for the interesting part, the traits. The traits, I have a nice kind of stairs going on here. First off, I have the Zephyr Speed, 5 points into Beast Mastery for that. It is extremely useful. The quickness you can get off Zephyr Speed can be used for stomping enemies. It can be used for reviving allies. It is extremely good in a team situation. Otherwise, it's good for damage. And then we have 10 points into marksmanship because I really couldn't find something that was extremely useful here without going into traps. So I put 10 points into marksmanship, which will give us 10% damage whenever our endurance is full. I think this is useful because of other traits giving us lots of vigor, and we can dodge while still keeping our endurance up a good amount of time. I'm still getting used to playing that way, but I can really see it being useful. Now, I have 25 points into skirmishing, which will give me some cool stuff. It'll give me that 5 seconds of vigor whenever I'm struck. That goes to what I was just saying with all the vigor. And then a chance to cause bleeding on critical hits, which is kind of adding up with the sigil I have on this weapon in order to just stack bleed, stack condition damage, and take something down. And then I have the last 5 points in here, which will give me 10% more damage while flanking, so if I can get behind someone, I will just destroy them. If I can get behind someone while full endurance, I will wreck everything in my path. Finally, I have the 30 points into Wilderness Survival, which is very good for what I'm using it for. I have the incoming disables get transferred to my pet. Every 90 seconds this can happen. And then I have the survival skills recharging 20% faster, which is good because I'm using all 3 of these survival skills. And even if you swap this out, you'd still be using 3. So this is a kind of survival skill build, if you want to call it that. And then finally, the whole thing which will give you invis whenever you're stunned, dazed, knocked down, etc. So these 2 skills together will give you some good defense against a lot of CC. So this build is good for both guarding points and team fights. Finally, as for pets, I'm using the jungle spider, which gives me this paralyze and will occasionally actually do an immobilize on its own. And then I have the eagle for the pure condition damage that it offers. The bleed is pretty nice and is just good for that addition to my own sustain. That's about all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more builds and Guild Wars 2 stuff and a variety of other gaming content, you can subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below. I've been Maple Dungeons, and I will see you next time.